Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. We have one of my favorite people here, John Solomon. He is an award-winning investigative journalist and the founder and editor-in-chief of Just the News, plus the host of John Solomon Reports. John, welcome back to the program.
Good to be with you, Tudor.
So you have so much going on, and we'd already talked to some folks about Russian collusion, and it was funny because in those interviews, they're like, oh, well, John Solomon's been reporting on this for years. And I was like, yes, I need to have John Solomon come on and tell us all about this because you have all the history. What's going on?
Well, listen, I'll remind everybody how I got involved with Sarah Carter on unraveling the Russia collusion story, because when it first broke in October of 16, I was told flatly by senior FBI officials, it wasn't true. Don't make a big deal out of it. It's not going anywhere. In fact, one of the senior officials I talked to used the term "no big there," which Pete Strzok would later use in his text messages when they became public, the disgraced FBI agent. But in March of 17, I did break a story on unmasking that in the last year of the Obama administration, there had been this explosion of Obama officials unmasking the conversations during the election of Americans that had been accidentally intercepted by the NSA. You're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to have the protection of civil liberties. You normally need a warrant, but they had this backdoor called unmasking, which is you can ask to see it. And if you want to know who the American is that we intercepted, you just get the name, and it basically eviscerates our civil liberties. And it had gone up by hundreds of percent in the last year of Obama. It was a very important civil liberty story from my standpoint. Sarah and I got off television that night. It was March of 17, and I drive home, and I pull into my driveway. It's about 10 o'clock at night, 10:30. It was about 10:30 at night, and there's a blue government car sitting outside my driveway with its parking lights on, right by my mailbox. I pull in. Two guys get out. They're clearly GI men, and they say, "Are you John Solomon?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And hey, we saw what you were reporting on today, and we want to let you know it's the tip of a very large iceberg. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Like, well, most of it's classified. I'm like, well, that doesn't help me. And they said something that now, which drove my reporting and Sarah's reporting and everyone who's worked on this with me over the last 7 or 8 years, they said something that now I understand how profoundly serious it was. They said the intelligence community and the FBI were used to carry out a political dirty trick using the most awesome tools that the American people gave us. We're only supposed to use them to fight counterterrorism and counterintelligence threats, but we use them to carry out a dirty trick, and you need to expose it. And that, they gave me no more detail, by the way. So
wait, you came home and these guys are outside of your house, like you're onto something secretly. They come to you.
That's what happened. And there's and they said one last thing. And I went right downstairs to my basement office. I said hello to my wife. Goodbye, my wife. Went downstairs and I typed up everything because I didn't have notes at the time. I typed up everything I could remember and I sent an email to Sarah Carter. And that's what started us. But the last thing they said is the most profound thing, which is if Americans find out how we misused and abused these tools, they will take these tools away from us, and we will no longer be safe from the real terrorism threats and the real counterintelligence and spy threats that you ask us to protect you from every day. And that was profound. I don't know. They never gave me their names. They didn't tell me their agencies. I have a theory that they worked for a very specific spy agency that wasn't the CIA. But that is what started us out. And when you look now, 8 years, and I probably a couple hundred stories of mine later, you now see that that's exactly what happened, that Barack Obama is told in late July 2016 that Hillary Clinton is going to hang a fake dirty shingle on Donald Trump's house called Russia collusion. It's a dirty trick. They intercepted it. And Barack Obama and John Brennan decide we're not going to stop the FBI and the CIA from going down this path. In fact, we might ride alongside them and give it credence and credibility, even though it's a bogus, dirty trick. And that meant misleading the FISA court. It meant misleading the American public in an official intelligence product of the United States called the Intelligence Community Assessment. It means launching a special counsel investigation by Mueller. It means filing false FISA applications on multiple occasions. It means when that goes awry, and now you've created a modus operandi of the government saying, whenever Donald Trump does something, we can just take a fake shingle on him. That means Ukraine impeachment is manufactured through a whistleblower complaint, for which I think there are significant accuracy issues. And then it means in 2020, when Donald Trump is trying to say I'm concerned about the integrity of our election, and we get a China report saying China's making fake driver's licenses in Michigan to do it, you look the other way. You don't investigate it because it might help Donald Trump. And then in 2022, you might be going to Mar-a-Lago and investigating Donald Trump for classified documents because you know that Joe Biden has a problem and you want to neutralize that problem. Now you look at that continuum and you understand why those guys who came to my driveway that night were so concerned that if it didn't stop in 17, it might become something that we never would be able to put the toothpaste back into the intelligence tube.
Well, but have we really? Because there hasn't been, and they haven't been officially exposed.
No. And by the way, what's the penalty for doing all the things that we did? There's been no real penalty. Some lawyer had to plead guilty to a crime and he got a slap on the wrist by Judge Boasberg. No one else has paid. Yeah, some people got fired. Some people lost their pensions. Then they got a settlement after they lost their pension. I mean, people have failed up in this continuum, and the temptation to keep doing this in the future, to manipulate future elections using the psychological operations, intelligence, and counterterrorism tools, it's as tempting now as it was in 16 when they crossed that Rubicon. I think we're at a watershed moment. If there isn't some significant accountability soon, I think this is going to become the norm, not the abnormality in the intelligence community. And the America we know is not going to be the same.
And the intelligence tools is this like listening in on us?
Oh, it's FISA, right? It's the ability to spy at every aspect of a person's life. It's the ability to unmask a conversation that you intercepted without a warrant. It's the ability to create illusion. I mean, look at how brilliant the illusion of Russia collusion was. They never, ever said Donald Trump was a stooge, but they convinced 60% of America by 2017 that he was a Russian stooge working for Vladimir Putin. They wrote an intelligence report knowing that it was predicated on the Steele dossier and other dubious intelligence, and they declared that Vladimir Putin's intention was to help Donald Trump win the election. People still believe that today, 30, 40%. And they didn't have an iota of evidence to base that on. It was garbage intelligence. I do think all those tools use psychological operations, which is the ability to create the illusion using intelligence tools of a falsehood, but make it look real. FISA, spying, special counsel's investigations, FBI authorities, search warrants, raids on people's homes. And at the end of the day, there are people whose reputations will never be restored from what happened to them in 16, 17. My journalism reputation will never be restored from the bogus allegations of my Ukraine reporting. There's no way to fix those people's lives and reputations. They were ruined forever. And we now know that they were ruined for a false cause.
What can those people, including you, what can you do? Now, when we spoke about this last week, the suggestion was civil lawsuits. And, and civil lawsuits, I think people go, well, there's no criminal effect to that. But oftentimes civil lawsuits, the loss of some financial gain, going after someone's finances and taking that money away is a big warning sign to other people. Like, not everybody is Obama. Some of these people don't have millions upon millions of dollars just waiting for someone to take it.
That's it. Well, that's it. And also to fund these lawsuits, they don't come for free. So victims don't have the money to fight for 5 years against a government that can spend $100 million trying to defeat you. Carter Page tried. He lost. Why did he lose? Because the best evidence that would show he was a real victim was kept from us for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. The government has already won. The people who perpetrated this fraud, they've already won. No matter what happens going forward, they already won. They achieved their goals. They convinced the American people that Hunter Biden's laptop was not real when it was. They convinced the American public that Donald Trump shouldn't be trusted as an early president because he was Vladimir Putin's asset. They convinced us that there was no reason to ask Ukrainians to investigate Hunter Biden when there was a big reason to do that. They gave us 4 indictments of President Trump to try to tell us you shouldn't vote against them. And we now know much of that evidence is suspect and the legal argument suspect. They already got what they wanted out of it. All that's left, the only thing that Pam Bondi can do, if she has the courage to do it, is to create a disincentive that so nobody in the future is tempted to do it again, because the penalty will be so severe. But 8 years of political history are forever altered. They'll never be gotten back. My Wikipedia page will never get back. And that's a small thing compared to the people who suffered much greatly I did, Mike Flynn and others. I mean, think about Mike Flynn. The FBI decides on January 4th, 2017, he's not committed a crime. They've turned his life upside down for 3 or 4 months. They want to clear him. And Barack Obama decides to have a meeting the next day in his office, and they concoct a scheme to keep him under criminal investigation, maybe trip him up into a lie. Is that the sort of president and intelligence establishment we want in the future?
Why Donald Trump, though? Why didn't it happen earlier? I mean, why didn't they go after the Bushes? Why didn't they do this to Reagan? Why is it that they started this with Donald Trump, or were there things that we just don't know?
I think the Obama era, when we finally find out the truth, not the romanticized version that we were force-fed by the legacy media for most of the Obama years, when we're done, Barack Obama created a cultural shift. There are certain mores in Washington you didn't cross. All right, you can play a political dirty trick in an ad. You can, put some Oppo research out, but you don't use the FBI and the CIA to do it. Barack Obama's team crossed that Rubicon, and then it's the danger now is that it could become the norm for history. But Barack Obama's era is the era where people were willing to do things that no other earlier generation of Americans were willing to do. Now, whether Barack Obama himself deserves the personal responsibility of that, or the people he surrounded himself does, needs to be determined on the evidence. He deserves the benefit of the doubt. I want to remind people that Russia collusion began way before anyone thought Donald Trump had a snowball's chance in hell of being the president. It starts in December 15 with a project that we know that Nellie Orr is working on. And it starts with a poll that I write about in my book. A lot of people miss this fact, but I think it's really important now. Hillary Clinton commissions a poll in late 15 with her team to find out which of all the scandals in her life are the ones that are going to keep her from becoming president. And she's certain it's going to be the email scandal, which is boiling at that point. I had broken that story in the summer of 15 at the Washington Times. But to her amazement, the poll comes back and says, Russia collusion, the fact that her husband took a $500,000 payment from from Vladimir Putin's people, and the Clinton team's reboot became a great financial benefit to the Democrats, but didn't actually improve our relationships with Russia or national security. That's going to be the thing. It was the Peter Schweitzer Clinton cash book. That was it. And they
surprise, corruption. People don't like it.
Yeah. And they start the effort to find Russia dirt on whoever the Republican nominee is going to be in December of 15. I don't think they thought Donald Trump had a chance in hell of being the president at that point. And to their amazement, he becomes the guy, and they just hang the shingle on him. But they needed to neutralize the Russia issue long before the American public knew it was going to be an issue.
What did the Obama administration do that they didn't want a Republican and after them? Because obviously it was, if you're saying this, then they wanted Hillary there. Why?
It's the extension of the Obama legacy. It takes it from the 8-year and 4-year cycle to the 12-year cycle that Reagan got, which Democrats had seldom had over the course of their time. I think they didn't like Donald Trump personally. They feared populism. They saw what happened in Brexit, and they thought Donald Trump was the U.S. exit, and they had to stop that. I mean, the Obama years are the years when the globalists begin to emerge as the dominant force in the Democratic Party. Before that, the conservatives and the Cheney era were the big U.S. police force, and then the counter reaction to the big American police force is that we're going to have globalism going forward. America will repress itself, and we'll all live in a globalist world. And those globalists take over all these agencies in that time frame. And Donald Trump was the potential Brexit disruptor, and he posed a greater threat than the other Republicans. So as time went on, they needed to pin him down. Now we see those populists everywhere in the world are viewed as a threat by the globalists. And that's why you got the Bolsonaro thing. You got the South Korean prime minister being impeached over, a martial law thing. May have been a wrong idea, but is it really impeachable? I think now the playbook is worldwide. America is the one place that's kind of counteracting it a little bit.
A little bit. So but when you go back to the Obama era, it wasn't this insanity over we have to have an open border, we have to let everybody in, we have
Yeah.
to have this situation where, well, he kind of started the I guess he did really start the hate on police. It wasn't
did?
fully defund police. He
Yeah.
started hating on the police, and then we moved into defund the police. Was
Remember
he
that
starting all of this?
I think Obama is a transitionary period he had a more extreme agenda, and he was very good most of the time at moderating it and moving it along a little bit. It's just gay marriage. It's not transgender rights, but gay marriage moved on to transgender rights and to where we are today, where we're willing to physically maim a child in the name of a transgender ideology, whether that child knows the consequences to it. That starts, but he was very good at masking it in moderated language. He was an enormous, listen, whatever you want to say about Barack Obama, the dude can give great speeches. He was an enormous orator. He was one of the great orators of the presidency, and he could sell something as not as radical as it might have been. But there are moments in his presidency where he tipped his hand. Remember the famous dismissing moment where he says, all those people are just God's guns and Bible people. He looked down on those people, the populists, the working class, those who believe that America should be put first. And when Donald Trump comes along, his ability to keep that course of the country is in great danger, much more than if a Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz or Ben Carson had been elected. And so they go from having to hang a Russian shingle on a Republican's house just to neutralize a political liability to, we got to destroy this guy because he could turn the world upside down. Our master plan could be set back. And I think that's when we're done with history, when we're done with the actual facts, not the ones we've been force-fed. I think that's what we might find behind that dirty curtain.
So what are we going to find about lawfare and attempted assassinations? Because are those going to connect back? I think that the American public has looked, now we've stepped back from this election and we've said there was a dirty plan to destroy his first term, and they took a lot of that away from him. I mean, they effectively took a lot of his first term away. So he has this 4 years, and he is overwhelmingly popular, even though they think they have him. They think they've destroyed him. I mean, it was kind of crazy when you watched the Republican primary. No matter what, he's not going to debates. He's not out there with those people. He is just blowing them away regardless. Yeah. He is so popular, and they start to really panic, and you can see it. And they start these lawsuits, and they raid Mar-a-Lago. Well, they can't be held accountable for that.
Yeah. To be determined, right? Kash Patel has opened up what we call the grand conspiracy case. He opened it up in April. His FBI team did. It's actually not him personally. He lets the agents follow the evidence. And they treat this as a wash, rinse, and repeat cycle, much like you would treat the mob in your extortion cases. It's prohibition liquor, then it's illegal gambling and taking over Vegas. And you can treat the mob, and then you can go back and charge things that are way outside the statute of limitations. So Donald clearing Hillary Clinton when there was evidence still to potentially indict her is one act in an overt conspiracy. Hanging the Russia shingle on Donald Trump becomes another. Ukraine, raiding his home. You can tie Jack Smith all the way back to Hillary Clinton and James Comey in the summer of 2016. That's called a grand conspiracy case. We used it against the mob. We used it against the drug cartels. Will Pam Bondi go the route that the FBI has predicated a case on? We don't know yet. But her first action, the first thing she's actually done to address this in the last few weeks, is she named a strike force. A strike force is like an all-star team. Think of it as a 1984 Olympic all-star team of basketball players. Well, these would be your best prosecutors, the FBI. You put them together and you say, see if this is a conspiracy. That's what they did to take the mob down. That's what they did to take the early Colombian drug cartels down. The fact that she chose that tool seems to hint that maybe she's going in that direction. And then it will come down to, what's the evidence? Where are you going to bring the charges? Do you bring them in Florida with Jack Smith's raid, or do you bring them in Washington, D.C., where John Durham lost 2 cases that a lot of people thought were slam dunks? Those are big questions. The decisions DOJ makes will determine whether we get any accountability or just another depressing round of disclosures and no accountability.
Who do you think should be held accountable? I mean, you've talked about Brennan. Joe Biden is apparently responsible for the unmasking of, I think it was Michael Flynn, that he was responsible for the unmasking of Michael Flynn. And then you've got Obama, and Hillary's in there too. So who's accountable? Who gets held accountable?
I don't know yet. I mean, I don't think after all the work I've done, I have all the evidence. I'm not trying to welch on the issue. Listen, I know for certain my reporting has proven that there is a political conspiracy of epic proportions. Whether it rises to a criminal level that a grand jury would hand up an indictment and then a jury would convict, we're a long ways from knowing that. And I suspect even after the 200, 300, 400 stories I've written on this, we don't know all the evidence. Listen, I still am getting FOIAs right now that show emphatically that people who testified in the 2019 Ukraine impeachment lied. They were just not telling the truth. I still get FOIAs every day that show things that went on in the early Trump years that now we know to be mirages. It took us 50 or 60 years to get some truth on Kennedy's assassination. It took us many, many decades to know the truth about Al Capone. I don't know how long it is before we have the full body evidence so we can say, that's the quarterback, that was the godfather, that's the capo, that's the lieutenant. These people should be prosecuted. And by the way, that's the brilliance of what the left did. They made this so complicated, it would take a decade or more to unravel.
I'm not sure people understand when you say it's even for you to get your reputation back, to get the Wikipedia page back, what that actually means. And I think it's important that the American people understand when you see someone. I mean, I was listening to you on Fox News like 3 times a week, going through all of this stuff. And then, suddenly I'm seeing less and less of John Solomon. But when you are an investigative reporter, your integrity, and this is something my father always talked about, was like, don't question my integrity ever. Because once you have somebody questioning your integrity, you lose all of your credibility when you go places. So tell us a little bit about what they took from you so people can understand when you say this is a big deal and you are one who didn't end up going through a trial.
Yeah. Listen, I don't consider myself a victim, but I do realize that there was a significant operation run against me. I had succeeded in unraveling the Russia collusion as a reporter and done so enough so that even prosecutors and the inspector general affirmed my reporting. Even the Washington Post had to acknowledge that at some point. And then I started to pivot because at the end of my reporting on Russia collusion, my sources told me at the same time they were falsely pursuing President Trump on Russia collusion, they were turning a blind eye to Hunter Biden. I get that information in December 2018 as I'm wrapping up my first round of Russia collusion reporting. And I write the first epic stories about Hunter Biden, that Vice President Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion of aid if the Ukrainian government didn't fire the prosecutor who happened to have an investigation against his son, Hunter Biden, in Burisma. That is March of 2019 when that happens. And a funny thing happens. For the first 2 months after I break that story, because the story is factually impeccable, New York Times, ABC News, and others confirm the story. And then an operation is run to make it look like I was in bed with Russian conspiracy theorists and Rudy Giuliani. I was conflicted from treating Rudy Giuliani as a source. I couldn't use him as a source. I tried to tell every reporter, I offered every reporter, I filed a conflict of interest notice because The Hill had asked me to work with Rudy on a podcast because I had a business relationship in my corporate role. I could not use him as a source. I literally filed a document that said, from this point forward, I can't use Rudy Giuliani as a source until we decide whether we're in business with him. Everybody in the Hill knew I wasn't using Rudy Giuliani. Everybody in the Hill knew my sources were the FBI. But out in the public, not a single reporter who wrote a story saying I had become a conspiracy theorist would look at that evidence. They wouldn't look at it. And, I'm named in an intelligence community whistleblower complaint that I was talking to Russians. Nope. I was talking to FBI. And at some point in the summer of 2022, my lawyer cooperates with the Justice Department. The Justice Department thinks, oh my God, this shows you how bad the Justice Department is, the Biden Justice Department. They think I'm coming in and I'm going to drop the dime on Rudy Giuliani because they haven't been able to prove it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to give my documents. My sources have cleared me to give my documents, but you got to put me before the grand jury. That's all I want. I want my chance to talk to the grand jury because my name has been smeared. So I walk in and they apparently, my lawyer walks in, drops these documents like, wait a second, we were John's source? Like, yeah, you, the Justice Department and the FBI, you were my source. Look at my documents. Look at my notes. And then like 2 days later, Rudy gets his devices back. I never got to go before the grand jury. But once they looked at the evidence, I had to like, oh my God, he got this legitimately. And it's all true. Now, what's happened since then? The very thing that I reported that Joe Biden personally tried to, and his team, was that Hunter Biden didn't pay taxes on his Burisma money in Ukraine. What did we learn? When the FBI, IRS whistleblowers, whose story I broke as well, come forward, what did we learn? He didn't pay his taxes on the Burisma money he was making in Ukraine. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. I had the documents all along. But my Wikipedia page says I'm a disgraced journalist. I don't get invites to most mainstream journalism events anymore. I'm looked down upon, even though I was accurate. Now, I'm a small victim. I didn't go have to plead guilty to a crime like Michael Flynn. I didn't spend millions of dollars in legal bills like many other people did. So I don't want to cry victim 1 second. But if that can happen to a guy who wrote legitimately accurate stories, look what happened to people who couldn't defend themselves from the great power of the government. That's what those guys in the driveway were warning about.
That exactly. And that's what I wanted people to hear. You think that these are victimless crimes, but even if you say, well, I wasn't a huge victim, no, but this is your livelihood. This is what you do for a living, and discrediting you is significant. They knew they had power in doing that. And then you watch that interview. I'll just say this really quickly. You watch that interview with Hunter Biden, and I don't know if you watched the entire 3-hour interview.
Yeah.
It scared me because he talks like a politician. Well, if I were to run for office in 3 to 4 years, I would go to El Salvador and empty the prisons and have those people flown back here. He's telling you what he believes. And I believe that's what the Democrat Party believes. We will just restart this. We've just got a few years off. We'll just restart it all. He talks about transgenderism. He talks about making sure these criminal illegals are here on the streets. To me, that's scary. And he wasn't held accountable for anything that he's done, and he could run for office.
Yeah, that's right. He's been pardoned. So, listen, I think your description of what's going on is right on. I listen to your podcast often, and I love it because I think you're giving common sense Americans in the middle of America the truth. And the great thing is middle America knows that they were sold an incredible bill of bogus goods. They know.
They do.
And they're not going to date that same person again. They're not.
Right. That's true.
But they'll paint up someone else to be the next Joe Biden or Hunter Biden. And the illusion of falling for that person is high, particularly if the intelligence and law enforcement apparatus of this government can still put their finger on the scale, which right now they could.
And just as you're talking about why Hillary Clinton was afraid that would come back to haunt her, the Russia collusion, and she ended up flipping that script. I mean, I look at just Gretchen Whitmer, what she's done here with taking the $20 million grant and giving it to a friend and taking taxpayer dollars and probably getting kickbacks on that. I mean, those are the types of things that when you see politicians doing that, that person is dirty and you should get away from them. And that's why we so enjoy what you do at Just the News. John Solomon, thank you so much for coming on.
Great to be with you, Tudor. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you all for joining us on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Make sure you check it out on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can watch it on Rumble or YouTube at Tudor Dixon. Join us next time and have a blessed day.